When my daughter told me I wasn't invited to her wedding, I hung up the phone and immediately bought a plane ticket. Because sometimes being a father means showing up when you're not wanted to protect the child who doesn't know she needs saving. What I discovered at that wedding altar would destroy one man's life and save my daughter's future. You won't believe what happened when I crashed the ceremony with evidence that changed everything. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The call came at 7:43 p.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was settling into my evening routine with a cup of coffee and the crossword puzzle Sarah's mother used to help me finish. 26 years of marriage, and Maria still felt present in those small moments of quiet concentration. "Dad?" Sarah's voice sounded different, strained. It seemed like she was forcing herself to make this call. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, setting down my pen. "How are the wedding plans coming? 3 weeks to go, right?" Silence. The kind that makes your stomach drop before you even know why. "Dad, I need to tell you something, and I need you not to get angry." I was already angry. That tone, that careful phrasing, I'd heard it before. Usually, right before someone delivers news designed to break your heart. They make you feel guilty for having feelings about it. "Okay," I said carefully. What's going on?" "Michael and I have been talking, and we've decided to keep the wedding small. Just immediate family and a few close friends." Michael, her fiancé of 2 years, the investment banker who wore $1,000 suits and spoke to service workers like they were beneath his notice. The man who'd somehow convinced my brilliant, compassionate daughter that she needed to apologize for her father's middle-class existence. "I am immediate family, Sarah." "I know, Dad, I know you are, but..." She took a shaky breath. "Michael's family is very traditional. They have certain expectations about weddings, about the guest list, about who should be there." The words hit me like cold water, and I don't meet their expectations. "It's not about you. It's just, Michael's father is paying for everything, and he wants to keep it to people in their social circle. You know how these wealthy families are about appearances." I knew precisely how wealthy families were about appearances. I'd spent 2 years watching Michael's parents treat me like hired help at family gatherings. The barely concealed looks of disdain when I mentioned my work as a high school guidance counselor. The way the conversation stopped when I entered a room as if my presence had contaminated their refined atmosphere. "Sarah, honey, I've been looking forward to walking you down the aisle since you were 5 years old and announced you were going to marry the mailman." Her voice broke slightly. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it already is." "Harder for who? For you? Or for your future husband who's ashamed of your father? That's not fair. Michael isn't ashamed of you. Then why am I not invited to your wedding?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. In the background, I could hear Michael's voice, though I couldn't make out the words, probably coaching her through this conversation, making sure she stayed on script. "Dad, I love you. You know I love you, but this is my wedding day, and I need everything to be perfect." Perfect. Without her father present. The man who'd raised her alone after her mother died, who'd worked 2 jobs to pay for her college education, who'd been her constant supporter through every dream and heartbreak. None of that mattered when it came to Michael's family's definition of perfection. "I understand," I said quiet. Lie. However, I understood nothing except that I was losing my daughter to people who valued money over love. "Do you? Really? I understand that you've made your choice. I hope it's the right one." I hung up before she could say anything else, before she could offer me consolation prizes or empty promises about family dinners that would make up for missing the most important day of her life. The house felt impossibly quiet after that call. I looked around the living room at the photos covering every surface. Sarah's graduation from high school, from college, her acceptance to grad school, her promotion to marketing director. A lifetime of proud father moments that meant nothing to the people she'd chosen to call family now. I walked to my desk and pulled out the wedding invitation that had arrived 3 months ago. Thick, expensive paper with gold embossing. "Sarah Elizabeth Martinez and Michael James Whitfield request the honor of your presence." The honor of my presence. What a joke. But as I stared at the invitation, something didn't sit right. Sarah had sounded wrong on the phone, not just upset about having to uninvite me, but scared, desperate. Even in 25 years of being her father, I'd learned to read the subtle differences in her voice. This wasn't just about keeping the peace with Michael's family. This was about something else entirely. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Sarah's voice saying, "I need everything to be perfect," with a desperation that had nothing to do with wedding planning and everything to do with fear. By 6 a.m., I was at my computer with a cup of coffee, doing what any concerned father would do in the digital age. I started digging. Michael Whitfield's social media presence was carefully curated, all professional headshots and charity galas, the kind of online persona designed to impress clients and colleagues rather than reveal anything real about the man behind it. But social media always tells a story if you know how to read between the posts. His LinkedIn showed frequent business trips, Chicago, Miami, Los Angeles, always alone in the photos, but that didn't mean anything. Cheating husbands weren't exactly known for documenting their affairs on professional networking sites. I switched to Instagram. More of the same polished image, but here I found something interesting. Photos from his company's quarterly retreats, team-building events, and office parties. And in several of those photos, always in the background but consistently present, was the same woman. Blonde, mid-30s, beautiful in that sharp professional way that suggested ambition over warmth. Tagged in a few photos as Vanessa Collins, senior associate. Her own Instagram was private, but her LinkedIn was open, with 2 years of experience at Michael's firm. Previously worked at Goldman Sachs in New York and graduated from Wharton. I spent an hour building a timeline. Every photo where she appeared was cross-referenced with Michael's travel schedule based on his posts. A pattern emerged: business trips that lasted longer than necessary, weekend conferences in cities known more for their nightlife than their financial sectors, photos of Michael at restaurants and bars in locations where he'd claimed to be working. But patterns weren't proof. And even if Michael was having an affair, that didn't explain Sarah's fear or why she'd suddenly uninvited me from the wedding. I picked up my phone and dialed my sister Rosa. "Tommy, it's barely 7 in the morning. Is everything okay?" "I need a favor, Rosa. A big one." Rosa had worked in private investigation for 15 years before retiring to open her own security consulting business. If anyone could help me get to the truth, it was her. "What kind of favor?" she asked, and I could hear her getting interested despite the early hour. "The kind where you pretend to be someone." "You're not, and get information I can't get legally." "Tommy Martinez, what has gotten into you?" I told her everything: the wedding on invitation, Sarah's strange behavior, the patterns I'd found online. Rosa listened without interrupting, the way she always did when she was shifting into professional mode. "Send me everything you found," she said when I finished. "Photos, timeline, names, everything. Give me 48 hours. Rosa, I need to know if..." 48 hours, Tommy. Trust me." She hung up, and I spent the rest of the morning second-guessing myself. Was I being a paranoid, overprotective father? Was I manufacturing drama because I couldn't accept that my daughter was choosing her new family over me? But every time I started to convince myself I was overreacting, I remembered that tone in Sarah's voice. Fear. Pure, desperate fear. My daughter was in trouble, and she couldn't tell me why. Rosa called exactly 47 hours and 32 minutes later. I was grading papers when my phone rang, red ink covering essays about career aspirations from 17-year-olds who had no idea how complicated life was about to become. "You were right to be worried," she said without preamble. I set down my pen and gave her my full attention. "What did you find?" "Michael Whitfield is having an affair with Vanessa Collins. Has been for 8 months. They're not particularly careful about it either. Hotel records, restaurant receipts, text messages. It's like they want to get caught." My hands clenched around the phone. "Does Sarah know?" "That's where it gets interesting. I think she does know, and I think she's planning to do something about it at the wedding." "What do you mean?" "I did some digging into Sarah's recent activity. She hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago. Same firm I used to work for. Paid for a full surveillance package on Michael. She has everything, Tommy. Photos, videos, hotel records, the whole 9 yards. I felt like someone had unched me in the stomach. Why didn't she tell me? Because she's planning to expose him publicly at the wedding. Think about it. Michael's entire family will be there, all their wealthy friends, business associates, everyone in their social circle. She's going to humiliate him in front of the people whose opinions matter most to him. Jesus, Rosa, that's brilliant, devastating, completely insane. Yeah, all of the above. I stood up and started pacing my small kitchen. That's why she uninvited me. She doesn't want me there when she detonates her marriage in front of 200 people, probably. She knows you'd try to stop her, or at least talk her into handling it privately. Of course I'd try to stop her. This isn't just about Michael. This will destroy her reputation too. Everyone will remember Sarah's wedding as the day she had a public breakdown, not the day she exposed a cheating fiancé. I know that, you know that, but she's 25 years old and her heart is broken. She's not thinking about long-term consequences. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, looking at the wedding invitation that had been sitting on my table for 2 days, like evidence of my failure as a father. What kind of evidence does she have? Everything. Photos of Michael and Vanessa entering hotels, videos of them kissing in restaurants, financial records show he's been paying for her apartment, text messages that would make a sailor blush. She could eradicate him if she wanted to. And she wants to, wouldn't you? I thought about it. If I'd discovered that Maria had been cheating on me, would I have wanted public revenge? Would I have tried to humiliate her in front of everyone we knew? Maybe, but that didn't make it right. Rosa, I need to get to that wedding. Tommy, she uninvited you for a reason. Maybe you should respect. She uninvited me because she's protecting me from the fallout of what she's planning to do. But she needs protection too, and she doesn't realize it. What are you going to do? I looked at the calendar on my refrigerator. Sarah's wedding was in 4 days. 4 days to figure out how to save my daughter from making the biggest mistake of her life. I'm going to crash a wedding. The wedding was in Napa Valley, a 3-hour drive from my house in Sacramento. I'd been to the venue once before when Sarah and Michael had their engagement party 18 months ago. Rolling hills, vineyards stretching to the horizon, the kind of picturesque setting that looked perfect in wedding photos and cost more than most people's annual salary. I spent the next 2 days planning my approach like a military operation. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. on Saturday, followed by cocktails and dinner. According to the invitation, the event was an outdoor ceremony with a reception in the main hall. I called the venue pretending to be a vendor and got a complete layout of the grounds. Security would be minimal. Wealthy people planning private events usually relied on exclusivity rather than actual security measures. The parking was a quarter-mile from the ceremony site, which meant I could get close without being spotted by early arriving guests. The biggest challenge would be timing. If I interrupted the ceremony itself, I'd be seen as the crazy ex-father making a scene. But if I waited until the reception, Sarah might have already executed whatever plan she had in mind. I needed to find her during the brief window between the ceremony and cocktails when she'd be taking photos and greeting guests. A moment when she'd be alone enough for a private conversation, but before she did something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Thursday evening, I called Rosa with my plan. You're going to hide in the bushes like a stalker? I'm going to position myself strategically until I can speak with my daughter privately. Tommy, this is insane. What if she doesn't? To want to see you? What if she calls security? Then I'll have tried. I can live with embarrassing myself. I can't live with watching her destroy her life without at least attempting to help. And what exactly are you going to say to her? Hi, honey, I know you uninvited me, but I crashed your wedding to tell you that publicly humiliating your cheating fiancé is a bad idea. When she put it like that, it did sound wild. I'm going to remind her who she is. The Sarah I raised wouldn't choose revenge over dignity. She's better than that. The Sarah you raised also wouldn't marry a man who cheats on her and asks her to uninvite her father from the wedding. That stopped me cold. Rosa was right. The daughter I'd raised would have dumped Michael the moment she discovered the affair. She would have come to me for support and advice. The fact that she was planning some elaborate revenge scenario meant she'd already changed in ways I didn't understand. Maybe, I said quietly, but she's still my daughter, and maybe she needs to remember that she doesn't have to face this alone. Tommy, what if you're wrong? What if she's not planning to expose him? What if you show up and ruin her actual wedding day? I'd been asking myself the same question for 2 days. What if Rosa's investigation was wrong? What if Sarah had decided she wanted a small wedding without her father, and I was creating drama where none existed? Then I'll apologize and leave. But Rosa, I heard something in her voice when she called. Fear, desperation, whatever she's planning, she's terrified. That's not the voice of a woman having a normal wedding. Okay, Rosa said finally, but I'm coming with you. What? No, not. Tommy, if Sarah is planning to blow up her wedding, you're going to need backup. Someone who can think clearly while you're having emotional reactions to everything. Someone who knows how to handle situations when they go sideways. I wanted to argue, but she was right. If Sarah was planning to expose Michael publicly, there was no telling how he'd react, or how his family would respond, or what kind of chaos would follow. Fine. But we stay in the background unless it's necessary to intervene. Agreed, but Tommy? Yeah? Wear a good suit. If we're crashing a wedding, we might as well look respectable doing it. Saturday morning dawned clear and warm, the kind of perfect California day that made wedding planners weep with gratitude. I picked up Rosa at 10 a.m., giving us plenty of time to reach Napa Valley and scout the location before guests started arriving. Rosa had dressed for reconnaissance. Dark jeans, comfortable shoes, sunglasses, her gray hair pulled back in a way that made her look like any middle-aged woman enjoying a day of wine tasting. I'd worn my best suit, the navy one I'd bought for Sarah's college graduation. If I was going to crash my daughter's wedding, I was going to look like I belonged there. You sure about this? Rosa asked as we merged onto Highway 80. No, but I'm doing it anyway. The drive took us through rolling hills that gradually gave way to the manicured perfection of Napa Valley. Vineyard after vineyard, each one more picturesque than the last, the kind of landscape that existed primarily to make wealthy people feel sophisticated about their alcohol consumption. Tell me about Michael, Rosa said as we passed a sign for the Silverado Trail. What's he like? I thought about the question. I'd spent 2 years trying to like my future son-in-law, searching for qualities that would explain why Sarah had fallen for him. Charming when he wants to be, intelligent, ambitious. He treats Sarah like a prized possession when other people are watching. And when they're not watching, he treats her like an accessory that needs to match his lifestyle. Everything about our relationship is calculated to enhance his image. The perfect girlfriend with the right job, the right education, the right appearance, but not the right father. Exactly. I'm a guidance counselor at a public high school. I drive a 10-year-old Honda and live in a tract house in Sacramento. I don't fit the aesthetic he's trying to create. Rosa was quiet for a moment, watching the vineyards roll past. You know what I think? What? I think Sarah knows all of this. I think she's known for a while that Michael is wrong for her, but she got caught up in the lifestyle, the status, the fantasy of being part of his world. The affair gave her a reason to end it that doesn't require admitting she made a mistake. It was a theory I hadn't considered. You think she's relieved? I think she's terrified. She's 25 years old and she's about to blow up her entire life in front of everyone she knows. That takes courage or desperation, maybe both. We reached the Meadowood Resort at 1:30, parking in a lot that was already half full of luxury cars, BMWs, Mercedes, a few Teslas, and one Bentley that probably cost more than my annual salary. Michael's people had arrived. The venue was even more beautiful than I remembered. Terraced gardens leading down to a natural amphitheater where white chairs were arranged in perfect rows. A pergola draped with flowers where Sarah and Michael would exchange vows. String quartet setting up near a champagne bar that sparkled in the afternoon sun. It looked like a fairy tale, which made sense because fairy tales were usually fantasies designed to distract people from reality. There's the bridal party, Rosa said, pointing to a group of women in dusty rose dresses posing for photos near the garden entrance. I scanned the group, looking for Sarah's familiar face. There, laughing at something the photographer said, her dark hair swept up in an elaborate style that must have taken hours to create. She looked beautiful. She also looked like she was about to throw up. She's terrified, I murmured. She's getting married in 2 hours. Most brides are terrified. That's not wedding jitters, Rosa. That's the look of someone who's about to do something they can't take back. I watched my daughter pose for photos with her bridesmaids, her smile bright and fake as stage makeup. Every few seconds, her eyes would dart toward the main building where Michael and his groomsmen were probably getting ready. She was tracking his location, planning her timing. Tommy, Rosa said quietly, look at the groom's party. I turned toward the resort's main entrance, where Michael emerged with 5 men in matching gray suits. Even from a distance, he looked confident, relaxed, like a man without a care in the world. Either he had no idea Sarah knew about his affair, or he didn't care. Arrogant bastard, I muttered. Or a man who thinks he's gotten away with it. Look at his body language. No stress, no guilt, no concern. Either he's a complete sociopath or he genuinely believes Sarah has no idea what he's been doing. As we watched, Michael's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, read something, and his face changed. Just for a moment, his confident mask slipped, revealing something that looked almost like fear. Then he typed a quick response and dropped the phone back into his pocket, his smile returning. That was interesting, Rosa observed. Very interesting. We watched for another 20 minutes as the wedding party took photos and guests began arriving. Michael's family was easy to identify. They moved through the crowd like they owned the place, accepting congratulations and compliments as their due. Sarah's friends were there too, teachers, social workers, and nonprofit employees who looked slightly out of place among the investment bankers and country club members. 2 different worlds, trying to pretend they belonged together. At 3:30, the string quartet began playing, and guests started moving toward their seats. It was almost time. Rosa, I said, I need to find Sarah before the ceremony starts. Tommy, she's probably in the bridal suite getting final touch-ups. You can't exactly knock on the door. Then I'll find another way. The bridal suite was on the 2nd floor of the resort's main building, accessible through a side entrance that was supposedly restricted to wedding parties only. The lock was the kind that looked impressive, but yielded to a credit card and 30 seconds of determined effort. A skill I'd learned during my brief stint as a maintenance worker in college. The hallway was empty, all the guests having moved outside for the ceremony. I could hear voices through the door marked Bridal Suite, female voices offering encouragement and last-minute advice. Sarah, you look perfect. Michael is so lucky to have you. This is going to be the most beautiful wedding. I knocked softly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Come in, Sarah called, probably expecting a resort employee with champagne or flowers or some other last-minute detail. I opened the door and stepped into a room full of surprised faces. 4 bridesmaids in dusty rose dresses turned to stare at me like I'd materialized from thin air. Sarah sat in front of a large mirror, her wedding dress spread around her like spilled cream, her face going white when she saw me. Dad, how did you? Ladies, I said politely to the bridesmaids, could you give us a moment alone? The maid of honor, a sharp-eyed woman I recognized as Sarah's college roommate, stepped forward protectively. Sarah, do you want us to stay? Sarah stared at me through the mirror, her hands shaking slightly as they rested on her lap. It's okay, Megan. Give us 5 minutes. The bridesmaids filed out reluctantly, shooting suspicious looks back at me as they closed the door. Sarah and Antoine. I were alone for the first time in months. Dad, you shouldn't be here. I told you. I know what you're planning, I said quietly. She went very still. What are you talking about? The private investigator, the evidence you have about Michael and Vanessa Collins, whatever you're planning to do during the ceremony or reception. For a moment, she looked like she was going to deny it. Then her composure cracked and she put her face in her hands. How did you find out? Because I'm your father and I know when you're in trouble. Sarah, honey, you can't do this. Can't do what? Marry him? Because I'm starting to think you're right. I pulled up a chair next to her, careful not to wrinkle her dress. That's not what I meant. You can't expose him publicly, not like this. She looked up at me, her eyes bright with tears that she was trying not to shed. He's been cheating on me for 8 months, Dad. 8 months while we were planning our wedding, while I was buying this dress, while I was deciding whether to invite you because his family thinks you're not good enough for their precious son. The pain in her voice cut through me like a blade. When did you find out? 6 weeks ago. I found a hotel receipt in his jacket pocket. Then I found more receipts. Then I hired someone to follow him, and now I have photos of him with her, videos of them together, proof that he's been spending our money on her apartment. Sarah, do you know what he said when I confronted him? He said it didn't matter because we weren't married yet, like our engagement was some technicality that made cheating acceptable. I felt a surge of rage so pure it made my vision blur. He said what? He said men like him were expected to have certain experiences before settling down. That Vanessa was just a phase, and once we were married, he'd be faithful, like I should be grateful he was getting it out of his system. Jesus Christ, Sarah. So yes, Dad, I'm going to expose him. In front of his family, his friends, his business associates, I'm going to show everyone exactly who Michael Whitfield is. I understood the impulse. God knows I wanted to find Michael and throw him through a window, but I'd lived long enough to see that revenge always costs more than you expected to pay. Sweetheart, listen to me. If you do this, if you humiliate him publicly, it won't just destroy him. It'll destroy you too. Good. Maybe I deserve to be destroyed for being stupid enough to fall for his lies. That's not true, and you know it. Sarah, you're brilliant, successful, and beautiful, and you have your whole life ahead of you. Don't let this bastard turn you into someone you'll regret being. She was crying now, careful tears that wouldn't ruin her makeup. Then what am I supposed to do? Just marry him? Pretend I don't know what he is? No, baby, you call off the wedding, right now. Tell everyone there's been a family emergency or that you're sick. We'll make excuses later. I can't. Do you know how much money his family spent on this? How many people are here? I can't just cancel a wedding 30 minutes before it's supposed to start. Yes, you can. It's your life, Sarah, not theirs. She looked at herself in the mirror, at the elaborate dress, perfect hair, and flawless makeup. I look like a stranger. You look like someone who's trying to be what other people want instead of who you are. There was a soft knock on the door. Sarah? Megan's voice. It's time. Sarah and I looked at each other, the weight of the moment settling between us like fog. What do I do, Dad? For the first time in months, she sounded like my little girl again. Not Michael's sophisticated fiancé or the Whitfield family's acceptable daughter-in-law, but Sarah Martinez, the girl who used to climb into my lap when the world felt too big and scary. You do what you think you can live with 20 years from now. Sarah stared at herself in the mirror for what felt like an eternity. Outside, I could hear the string quartet playing, guests settling into their seats, the low hum of 200 people waiting for a show that might not happen. If I call it off now, she said quietly, everyone will want to know why. Michael's family will demand explanations. They'll blame me for humiliating their son. Let them. Their opinions don't matter. They do matter, Dad. These people control Michael's career, his social circle, his entire world. If I embarrass them, they'll make sure I never work in marketing again. They'll destroy my reputation. Sarah, you work for a nonprofit that helps underprivileged kids get college scholarships. Do you think the Whitfield family has influence there? She smiled sadly. You'd be surprised how small the professional world can be when wealthy people want to block you. Another knock on the door, more insistent this time. Sarah, we need to go. Megan's voice carried a note of urgency. The guests are getting restless. 1 minute, Sarah called back, then turned to me. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Always. If you were in my position, what would you do? I thought about it carefully. At her age, with her whole life ahead of her, she faced a choice between public humiliation and private dignity. I'd walk away. I'd rather be embarrassed for a day than trapped in a marriage built on lies for the rest of my life. Even if it meant admitting I made a terrible mistake in front of everyone I know. Especially then. Sarah, the people who matter will understand. The people who don't understand don't matter. She nodded slowly, then stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the ceremony site. 200 people in their wedding finery, Michael standing at the altar in his perfect gray suit, the photographer positioning himself for the perfect shot of the bride's entrance. He looks so confident, she murmured, like he knows he's gotten away with everything. Maybe he has. Maybe that's okay. How can you say that? Because getting away with it means you don't have to destroy yourself to destroy him. Sarah, he'll face consequences for his choices eventually. Men like Michael always do, but those consequences don't have to come from you. She was quiet for a long moment, watching her almost husband chat with his groomsmen, probably making jokes about ball and chain metaphors and the end of his freedom. I keep thinking about Mom, she said. The words hit me unexpectedly. Sarah rarely mentioned Maria anymore, not because she'd forgotten, but because the pain was still too close to the surface even after 7 years. What about her? She would have seen through Michael immediately. She would have told me he was wrong for me the first time I brought him home. Maria would have disliked Michael at first sight, not because he was wealthy or successful, but because she had a gift for seeing through charm to the character underneath. She would have taken one look at the way he treated service workers and known exactly who he was. Your mother would have wanted you to be happy, I said, and she would have known that happiness doesn't come from marrying someone because they look good on paper. She would have been embarrassed by me canceling my wedding 30 minutes before it was supposed to start. No, sweetheart. She would have been proud of you for having the courage to choose yourself over other people's expectations. Sarah turned away from the window and looked at me with something I hadn't seen in months. Trust. For the first time since she'd gotten engaged, she was asking for my advice instead of defending her choices. If I don't go through with this, she said, will you help me face everyone? Sarah, I will stand next to you through anything. That's what fathers do. She smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all day. I uninvited you from my wedding because I was ashamed of me, of myself. I knew you'd see what Michael was, and I wasn't ready to admit I'd been wrong about him. It was easier to exclude you than to face the truth. And now I think I'd rather face the truth with you beside me than face a lifetime of lies alone. The knocking on the door became urgent, multiple voices now. Sarah, everyone's waiting. The minister wants to start. Is everything okay in there? Sarah looked at me one more time. Dad, will you walk with me? Where? Downstairs. To tell everyone there isn't going to be a wedding today. Walking down the resort's elegant staircase with Sarah felt like a march toward either salvation or catastrophe. Possibly both. Her hand rested on my arm, and I could feel her trembling slightly through the silk of her wedding dress. The main floor buzzed with pre-ceremony energy. Caterers are making final preparations for the reception that might not happen. Wedding planners are checking their schedules, a few early guests who'd wandered back inside for restrooms or drinks. Sarah? A woman's voice called from across the lobby. I turned to see Michael's mother, Patricia Whitfield, approaching with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to having her expectations met immediately. Patricia was the kind of woman who wore her wealth like armor, perfectly styled silver hair. This suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, jewelry that caught light from across a room. She'd never liked me, and she'd never bothered to hide it. Darling, what are you doing down here? Everyone's waiting for you. Patricia's eyes flicked to me with barely concealed distaste. And what is he doing here? Mrs. Whitfield, I said politely, there's something Sarah needs to tell everyone. Tell everyone what? Patricia's voice carried the edge of someone who sensed her perfect plans were about to be disrupted. Sarah took a deep breath. There isn't going to be a wedding today. The words seemed to hang in the air like a challenge. Patricia went very still, her face cycling through disbelief, shock, and finally cold fury. Excuse me? I can't marry Michael, not today, not ever. I need to tell everyone so they can go home. Are you having some nervous breakdown? Wedding day jitters are perfectly normal, darling, but it's not jitters, Mrs. Whitfield. Your son has been having an affair. Patricia's perfectly composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that looked almost like relief. Then she recovered, drawing herself up to her full height. That's a grave accusation, Sarah. I hope you have proof. Sarah reached into the small purse she'd been carrying and pulled out an envelope. Photos, videos, hotel records, and financial statements showing Michael's been paying for another woman's apartment. Would you like to see them? That won't be necessary. Patricia's voice could have frozen water. Even if what you're saying is true, surely this can be discussed privately, after the wedding. After the wedding? Sarah's voice rose slightly. You want me to marry your son knowing he's been cheating on me for 8 months. I want you to honor the commitment you've made to this family, to the 200 guests who've traveled here to celebrate your union, to the vendors who've been paid, the arrangements that have been made. I stepped forward, putting myself slightly between Patricia and my daughter. Mrs. Whitfield, with all due respect, your son's infidelity voided any commitment Sarah made to your family. Patricia turned her Arctic gaze on me. Mr. Martinez, this is a private family matter. Your presence here is completely inappropriate. He's my father, Sarah said firmly, and he has every right to be here. According to our guest list, he does not. The casual cruelty of the statement hit like a slap. I felt Sarah's hand tighten on my arm, her fingers digging in through my suit jacket. Mrs. Whitfield, I said quietly, I'm going to Hall. Help my daughter, address your guests now. Whether you participate in that conversation is entirely up to you. Patricia's eyes narrowed. If you disrupt this wedding, if you embarrass this family publicly, there will be consequences, legal consequences. Are you threatening us? Sarah asked. I'm informing you of the realities of your situation. Michael has a reputation to protect and business relationships to maintain. If you attempt to damage those relationships with unsubstantiated claims, the claims are substantiated, Sarah interrupted, holding up the envelope. Your son documented his affair quite thoroughly. Credit card receipts, text messages, photos. Either he's incredibly careless or he wanted to get caught. For the first time, Patricia looked genuinely shaken. You hired investigators? You spied on my son? I followed up on evidence I found by accident. What I discovered was that I've been engaged to a man who lies as naturally as he breathes. A commotion from the entrance caught our attention. Michael himself appeared, flanked by his groomsmen, all of them looking confused and slightly irritated. What's taking so long? Michael called across the lobby. The minister says we need to start or we'll lose our window for photos. He spotted Sarah and me first, his face lighting up with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then he noticed his mother's expression and his stepfather, David, hovering nearby, looking like he wished he were anywhere else. Is everything all right? Michael approached with the confident stride of a man who believed charm could solve any problem. Your fiancée is having pre-wedding hysteria, Patricia said coldly. She's making wild accusations and threatening to cancel the ceremony. Michael's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. Sarah, sweetheart, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick? We can delay things a few minutes if you need. I know about Vanessa, Sarah said quietly. The words hit Michael like a fizzle. I call blow. His confident posture collapsed, his face going pale under his perfectly applied tan. For a moment, he looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd been caught in a lie and had no idea how to talk his way out of it. Vanessa? He tried to inject confusion into his voice, but it came out strangled. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah pulled a photograph from her envelope and held it up. Even from where I stood, I could see it clearly. Michael and a blonde woman in an intimate embrace outside what looked like an expensive hotel. Vanessa Collins, senior associate at your firm, the woman you've been sleeping with for 8 months while planning our wedding. Michael's groomsmen exchanged uncomfortable glances. His best man, a guy named Brad, whom I'd met at the engagement party, took a step backward like he was trying to distance himself from the explosion. Sarah, this isn't the place for this conversation, Michael said desperately. We have guests waiting. Whatever you think you saw. I have videos, Michael. Financial records, hotel receipts, text messages. Sarah's voice grew stronger with each word. I have everything. Michael looked around frantically as if searching for an escape route. His eyes landed on me, and suddenly his desperation transformed into anger. This is your doing, isn't it? He pointed an accusatory finger at me. You couldn't stand the fact that your daughter was marrying up, so you hired some private investigator to dig up dirt on me. Actually, I said calmly, Sarah handled that herself. I'm just here to support her decision. What decision? Sarah stepped forward, her chin raised with a dignity that made me proud. The decision not to marry a man who thinks fidelity is optional. The lobby of the Meadowood Resort felt like a stage where a costly play was about to go wrong. Michael stood in the center, his perfect we. Ding-day crumbling around him. At the same time, his groomsmen shifted uncomfortably, and his mother watched with the expression of someone calculating damage control. Sarah, you're making a huge mistake, Michael said, his voice taking on a wheedling tone I'd never heard from him before. Whatever you think you know, whatever someone told you, it's not what it looks like. It looks like you're fucking another woman while engaged to me, Sarah replied, with a bluntness that made his mother gasp. Sarah Elizabeth, Patricia snapped. That language is completely inappropriate. What's inappropriate, Sarah shot back, is your son's behavior. What's inappropriate is asking me to marry a cheater because you're worried about your social embarrassment. Michael tried a different approach, stepping closer to Sarah with his hands extended in a pleading gesture. Sweetheart, I know this looks bad, but you have to understand. Men in my position face certain pressures, certain expectations from colleagues and clients. Vanessa is in a business relationship that got complicated. I felt my hands clench into fists. This bastard was trying to justify his affair as a professional necessity. A business relationship? Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. Is that what you call the apartment you've been paying for? The weekend trips to Carmel in San Francisco? The jewelry receipts I found? Those were business expenses. Stop. Sarah held up her hand. Just stop lying. I have photos of you and Vanessa in restaurants, in hotel rooms, at the apartment I now know you've been renting for her. I have text messages where you tell her you love her. I have credit card statements showing you bought her the same necklace you gave me for our anniversary. The last detail hit like a sledgehammer. Even Patricia looked shocked. Michael had given his fiancée and his mistress identical gifts, a level of callousness that was breathtaking even by cheating bastard standards. Sarah, Michael tried again, but his voice was weaker now, the fight going out of him as he reeled. Eyes the extent of what she knew. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can't do anything, Sarah interrupted. There is no we anymore, Michael. There hasn't been a we for 8 months. One of the groomsmen, a guy I recognized from Michael's banking firm, cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe we should give you two some privacy to work this out. There's nothing to work out, Sarah said firmly. I'm not marrying him. Today or ever. Michael's expression suddenly changed, the pleading mask dropping away to reveal something much uglier underneath. Fine. You want to throw away everything we've built together over some meaningless fling? Go ahead, but don't expect me to beg. Meaningless fling? Sarah's voice rose. You told her you loved her, Michael. You've been planning to leave me for her. I never said that. You texted her last week that you were going to handle the Sarah situation after the honeymoon. What exactly did you mean by that? Michael's face went white. That particular text message was news to him that Sarah had seen it. You don't understand the context. I understand that you were planning to divorce me before we were even married. Were you going to wait a year, 2 years? How long were you going to let me play the happy wife while you continued your relationship with Vanessa? This is ridiculous, Patricia interjected. Michael, tell her she's misinterpreting everything. But Michael couldn't tell her that because Sarah wasn't misinterpreting anything. The evidence was too clear, too comprehensive. He'd been caught completely, and now his true character was emerging like water through a cracked dam. You know what, Sarah? Michael straightened his tie and drew himself up to his full height. Maybe this is for the best. Maybe I was settling. You think you're so perfect, but you're just a middle-class girl Rom Sacramento who got lucky enough to catch the attention of someone from a better family. The insult hung in the air like poison gas. I took a step forward, but Sarah caught my arm. Let him talk, Dad. I want everyone to hear who he is. Michael was warming up now, his wounded pride transforming into vicious anger. You want to know the truth? Vanessa understands my world in ways you never could. She's sophisticated, educated, and from a good family. She doesn't embarrass me at business dinners or charity events, unlike me. Sarah asked quietly. Unlike you. Did you think I didn't notice how out of place you looked at my family's events? How did my colleagues' wives pity you? You're pretty enough and smart enough for a certain type of man. But Sarah, you were never going to be enough for me long term. The cruelty was breathtaking. This wasn't just the anger of a man caught cheating. This was the calculated destruction of someone he'd claimed to love. I'd seen bullies in my years as a guidance counselor, but rarely had I witnessed emotional abuse delivered with such precision. Sarah, however, didn't crumble. Instead, she smiled with something that looked almost like relief. Thank you, she said. Michael blinked, thrown off by her response. What? Thank you for showing me exactly who you are. For the last 6 weeks, I've been wondering if I was making a mistake by calling off this wedding. I've been second-guessing myself, thinking maybe the affair was just a momentary lapse in judgment, maybe we could work through it. She gestured toward him with something approaching gratitude. But this cruelty, this arrogance, this complete lack of remorse, this is who you are, and I would rather spend the rest of my life alone than waste another minute with someone who sees me as a temporary convenience. Michael's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this, Sarah. You think you're too good for me? You'll never find another man willing to overlook your round your family situation. You'll end up like your father, alone and bitter, working some meaningless job and wondering what might have been. That's when I finally lost my temper. I stepped between Michael and my daughter so fast that he took a step backward, his sneer faltering when he saw my expression. Son, I said quietly, you just made a grave mistake. Mr. Martinez, I think you should listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. My voice was steady, controlled, the tone I'd perfected over 20 years of dealing with disrespectful teenagers who thought they could intimidate authority figures. You just insulted my daughter's character, my family, and my profession. You did it publicly, in front of witnesses, as a deliberate attempt to wound someone who trusted you with her heart. Michael tried to recover his composure, straightening his designer tie like armor. I was simply being honest about the realities of our situation. The reality of your situation is that you're a cheating coward who got caught. And now you're lashing out at everyone except the person responsible for this mess. Yourself. You have no right to speak to me that way. I have every right. I'm the father of the woman you've spent 2 years manipulating, lying to, and ultimately betraying. I'm the man you excluded from this wedding because my middle-class existence embarrassed you. I took another step forward, close enough that he could see the anger in my eyes. And I'm someone who's dealt with bullies like you my entire professional career. Patricia moved toward us, her voice sharp with authority. This is completely inappropriate. Michael, you don't have to listen to this. He does, I replied, without taking my eyes off her son. Because here's what's going to happen. Michael is going to apologize to my daughter. He's going to acknowledge that he is entirely at fault for the collapse of this relationship. And then he's going to walk outside and explain to those 200 guests why there isn't going to be a wedding today. Like hell I am, Michael snarled. Or, I continued as if he hadn't spoken, I can walk outside and explain it for him. I can show those guests the photographs Sarah has, read them the text messages, and provide them with a detailed timeline of his affair. I can make sure that everyone in his professional and social circle knows exactly what kind of man Michael Whitfield is. Michael's face went pale. You wouldn't dare. Try me. For a moment, we stood in silence, two men measuring each other's resolve. Michael might have been wealthy and well-connected, but I'd spent decades helping teenagers navigate crises. I knew how to project calm authority even when my heart was racing with adrenaline. Dad, Sarah's voice was soft but firm. I don't need him to apologize to me. I don't need him to take responsibility for his actions. I need him to get out of my sight so I can go talk to our guests. I looked back at my daughter, standing in her wedding dress with her spine straight and her chin raised, looking every inch the strong, dignified woman I'd raised her to be. She was right. Michael's apology would be meaningless. Words without sincerity, damage control rather than genuine remorse. You're right, I said. He's not worth the effort. Michael seized what he apparently thought was an opportunity to regain control of the situation. Sarah, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. When you realize what you've thrown away, the only thing I've thrown away is a future with a man who thinks love is a business transaction. Sarah's voice carried clearly through the lobby. The only mistake I made was not seeing who you are sooner. Fine, Michael snapped. But don't expect me to make this easy for you. Don't expect me to quietly disappear while you destroy my reputation with your lies and accusations. They're not lies, and you know it. But Michael, I want you to know something. Sarah stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I was planning to humiliate you today. I was going to wait until we were at the altar with all your family and friends watching, and then I was going to read your text messages to Vanessa out loud. I was going to show everyone those photos, destroy your reputation in front of everyone who matters to you. Michael's eyes widened in horror as he realized how close he'd come to total public humiliation. But my father convinced me that revenge would make me as small and petty as you are. So instead, I'm giving you a choice. You can walk out there and tell everyone the wedding is canceled due to irreconcilable differences. You can preserve what's left of your dignity and end this quietly. And if I don't? Sarah smiled, and for the first time all day, it looked genuine. Then I'll remember that I'm my father's daughter, and I'll handle this situation the way he taught me to handle bullies. I felt a surge of pride so intense, it nearly overwhelmed me. This was the daughter I'd raised, not the woman who'd been trying to transform herself into Michael's ideal partner, but the fierce, principled person who'd emerged from the ruins of her broken engagement. Michael looked between Sarah and me, calculating his options. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. What do you want me to tell them? The truth, Sarah said, that we discovered we weren't compatible and decided not to go through with the marriage. You can make it sound mutual if it helps your pride. Michael nodded reluctantly. And the photographs? The evidence? Stays between us, as long as you don't try to contact me again or cause problems for my family. It was more generous than he deserved, but it was classic Sarah, strong enough to protect herself, gracious enough to offer her opponent a way to save face. Michael straightened his tie one final time and walked toward the door that led to the ceremony site. As he reached the threshold, he turned back. Sarah, for what it's worth, I did love you, in my way. I know, she replied quietly. That's the saddest part of all of this. After Michael left to address the guests, Sarah and I stood alone in the resort lobby for the first time since I'd crashed into her bridal suite. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of everything that had just transpired. Are you okay? I asked. Sarah looked down at her elaborate wedding dress, then back at me with something that looked almost like amusement. I'm standing in a $5,000 dress that I'll never wear again. Having just called off my wedding 30 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, I should be devastated. But you're not? But I'm not. She shook her head in wonder. Dad, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in months. Is that terrible? It's honest. Through the windows that overlooked the ceremony site, we could see Michael addressing the assembled guests. Even from a distance, his body language conveyed defeat and embarrassment. Conversations were breaking out among the crowd. Surprise, confusion, whispered speculation about what could have gone wrong. They're going to have questions, Sarah said, watching the scene unfold. Let them have questions. You don't owe anyone an explanation beyond what you're willing to give. What about Michael's family? They'll blame me for this, for humiliating them, for wasting their money. Sarah, anyone who blames you for refusing to marry a cheating fiancé isn't worth your concern. And anyone who matters will understand that you did the brave thing. She nodded slowly, then turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, always. Did you ever like Michael, even in the beginning, before you knew what he was really like? I thought carefully about how to answer. Sarah had just shown tremendous courage in calling off her wedding. Still, she was also fragile, possibly second-guessing every choice she'd made over the past 2 years. I wanted to like him, I said finally. I wanted to be like anyone who made you happy. But from the first time I met him, something felt off. What do you mean? He was too polished, too perfect, like he was performing the role of the ideal boyfriend rather than being one. And the way he talked about you when you weren't around, like you were an acquisition rather than a partner. Sarah winced. Why didn't you say anything? Because you were an adult making your own choices. And because I hoped I was wrong. I hoped that maybe he was just nervous around your father, or that his feelings for you were deeper than they appeared. But they weren't. No, sweetheart, they weren't. Michael saw you as a beautiful, intelligent woman who would enhance his image and give him access to a different kind of respectability. but he never saw you as an equal partner. Through the windows, we could see guests beginning to leave the ceremony site. Some looked concerned, others confused. A few were already pulling out their phones, probably calling for rides or making new dinner plans. I should go talk to them, Sarah said, at least to thank them for coming and apologize for the inconvenience. You don't have to apologize for anything, but if you want to address them, I'll stand with you. Dad, most of these people are Michael's friends and family. They're going to be upset with me, possibly hostile. Are you sure you want to be part of that? I looked at my daughter. Brilliant, courageous, standing in the ruins of her wedding day with more dignity than most people showed on their best days, and felt the same fierce protectiveness that had driven me to crash this wedding in the first place. Sarah, I've spent the last 2 years being excluded from your life because I wasn't good enough for Michael's circle. Today, you chose me over all of them. Do you think I'm going to abandon you now? She smiled then, the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen from her in months. No, I guess you're not. Besides, I added, I've been dealing with difficult people and uncomfortable situations for 20 years as a guidance counselor. Trust me, I can handle a few upset wedding guests. Sarah took a deep breath, smoothed her dress, and squared her shoulders. Okay then, let's go face the music. We walked toward the door together, my daughter's hand resting lightly on my arm. Through the glass, I could see the crowd milling around the ceremony site, some guests heading toward the parking lot, while others clustered in small groups, clearly discussing the sudden turn of events. Dad? Sarah's voice was quiet. Yeah? Thank you for coming today, for crashing my wedding and probably saving my life. Sarah, you saved your own life. I just reminded you that you had the strength to do it. Still, thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I gave up on myself, I squeezed her hand gently. That's what fathers do, sweetheart. We show up, especially when we're not invited. As we stepped outside into the perfect California afternoon, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Pride in my daughter, satisfaction in my choices, and hope for our future together. Sarah had faced the hardest decision of her young life with courage and grace, choosing truth over convenience and dignity over social approval. Whatever challenges lay ahead, angry guests, social embarrassment, the practical complications of canceling a wedding, we'd face them together. Father and daughter, united again after too long apart. The scene outside resembled a costly disaster movie. 200 guests in formal attire stood scattered across the manicured grounds, some heading toward their cars, others gathered in clusters, talking in urgent whispers. Michael was nowhere to be seen. Apparently, he'd delivered his brief explanation and disappeared, leaving everyone else to figure out what came next. Sarah and I made our way toward the largest group of guests, mostly older adults whom I recognized as Michael's extended family and family friends. They turned toward us as we approached, their expressions ranging from concern to barely concealed annoyance. Sarah, dear, said an elderly woman in an elaborate hat, what on earth is going on? Michael said something about incompatibility, but surely these things can be worked out. Mrs. Henderson, Sarah replied gracefully, I appreciate your concern, but Michael and I have discovered that we want very different things from marriage. We should realize this now, rather than after making vows we couldn't keep. But the expense, another woman interjected. The planning, the arrangements, surely a brief counseling session could have resolved whatever issues. With respect, I said, stepping slightly forward. Some issues can't be resolved through counseling. Sarah made a difficult but necessary decision, and she deserves support, not criticism. A man I recognized as one of Michael's business associates looked me up and down with apparent disdain. And you are? Sarah's father? Ah. His tone suggested that my presence explained everything wrong with the situation. I understand you weren't on the guest list. No, I wasn't, but I'm here now, and I'll be here for whatever Sarah needs going forward. The tension in the group was palpable. These people had invested time, money, and social expectations in this wedding, and they were looking for someone to blame for its spectacular collapse. Sarah, Mrs. Henderson tried to go, and perhaps if you and Michael took some time apart to think things through. Mrs. Henderson, Sarah interrupted gently but firmly, there's nothing to think through. The engagement is over. I'm sorry if that inconveniences anyone, but I won't apologize for choosing honesty over appearances. Patricia Whitfield materialized at the edge of our group, having spent the last 20 minutes managing her damage control efforts. Her perfect composure was cracking around the edges, stress lines showing through her flawless makeup. Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation inside, Patricia said with forced pleasantness. Perhaps we were all too hasty. Wedding day nerves can make small problems seem insurmountable. Mrs. Whitfield, Sarah said calmly, your son's 8-month affair isn't a small problem caused by wedding day nerves. It's a fundamental betrayal that makes marriage impossible. The words hit the gathered crowd like a bomb. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Several people gasped audibly. Mrs. Henderson's elaborate hat seemed to deflate. Patricia's face went white, then red, then white again. Sarah, that's a grave accusation to make publicly. It's not an accusation. It's a documented fact. Sarah's voice carried clearly across the group. I have photographs, financial records, and communications that prove Michael has been unfaithful for months. The only question was whether to expose him publicly or end things quietly. I chose quietly, but I won't pretend this is mutual or mysterious. The crowd processed this information with the kind of stunned silence that follows major revelation. Some guests looked shocked, others embarrassed to be witnessing such personal drama. A few nodded with the satisfaction of people whose suspicions had been confirmed. "Well," said Mrs. Henderson finally, "that does change things considerably." Patricia made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative, even if Michael made some mistake, as surely the proper response is forgiveness and counseling, not this kind of public spectacle. "Mrs. Whitfield," I said quietly, "there's no public spectacle here. Sarah could have exposed your son's affair in front of everyone during the ceremony itself. Instead, she's handling this with more grace than your family deserves. How dare you?" "How dare I what? Support my daughter? Expect basic decency from the man she was supposed to marry? Mrs. Whitfield, you spent 2 years treating me like I wasn't good enough for your family. Today your son proved he's not good enough for mine." The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Then, unexpectedly, someone started clapping. I turned to see a woman about Sarah's age, someone I didn't recognize, applauding slowly but steadily. Another guest joined her, and then another guest joined her. Within moments, a significant portion of the crowd was clapping, not sarcastically, but with genuine appreciation for Sarah's courage. "Good for you," called out a man in an expensive suit. "Takes guts to walk away from a mistake, even a public one. Better to find out now than after 10 years of marriage," added someone else. Patricia looked around at the supportive crowd with growing horror. This wasn't going according to her plan. Instead of social pressure forcing Sarah to reconsider, she was receiving public validation for her decision. "This is ridiculous," Patricia snapped. "You're all encouraging her to throw away a good man over some temporary indiscretion." 8 months isn't temporary," Sarah said firmly, "and a man who cheats on his fiancée while planning their wedding isn't good, Mrs. Whitfield. He's a man who views commitment as optional." The clapping died away, replaced by murmurs of agreement and support. I watched my daughter handle the crowd with poise and confidence, explaining her decision without defensiveness or apology. This was the woman I'd raised, strong, principled, willing to choose brutal truth over comfortable lies. "Sarah," called out a woman I recognized as one of Sarah's college friends. "What do you need from us? How can we help?" "Just your understanding," Sarah replied. "And maybe help spreading the word that while there won't be a wedding today, you're all still welcome to stay for dinner if you'd like. The resort has already prepared the meal, and I hate to see it go to waste." It was a generous gesture, typical of Sarah's character. Even amid her crisis, she was thinking about other people's comfort and convenience. Several guests immediately accepted the invitation. Others made polite excuses and headed toward their cars. Patricia gathered the remaining members of Michael's family and stalked off toward the parking lot without another word. As the crowd began to disperse, either toward their cars or toward the reception hall, Rosa appeared at my elbow. "Well," she said quietly, "that went better than expected. How long have you been watching?" "Long enough to see your daughter handle herself like a champion. Tommy, you should be proud." I looked over at Sarah, who was graciously accepting congratulations and support from friends and relatives, her wedding dress gleaming in the afternoon sun. She looked radiant, not with the artificial glow of a traditional bride, but with the genuine happiness of someone who'd just dodged a bullet. "I am proud," I said, "prouder than I've ever been." "So what happens now?" "Now we're going to have dinner with the people who matter. We celebrate Sarah's courage and her freedom, and tomorrow we start planning the rest of her life, the real one, not the fantasy she was trying to live for Michael's benefit." As Sarah walked toward us, her dress trailing behind her like liquid silk, I realized something had fundamentally changed. For 2 years, I'd been watching my daughter transform herself into someone I barely recognized, molding herself to fit Michael's expectations and his family's standards. Today, she'd transformed back into herself, and the woman walking toward me, despite the unconventional circumstances, looked more beautiful than any traditional bride I'd ever seen. "Dad," she said, reaching for my hand, "are you ready to go to dinner? I hear they're serving my favorite, the menu you weren't supposed to be here to enjoy." "Sweetheart," I replied, tucking her hand through my arm, "I've been ready for this dinner for 2 years." As we walked toward the reception hall together, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about Sarah's happiness rather than her social status, I reflected on the strange turns life could take. I'd come to this wedding uninvited, expecting to prevent a disaster. Instead, I'd witnessed my daughter save herself, with courage and grace that would have made her mother proud. Sometimes the best weddings were the ones that never happened, and sometimes crashing a party was the most loving thing a father could do. 3 months later, Sarah called me on a Sunday evening while I was grading papers in my living room. "Dad, I have some news." "Good news, I hope?" "The best news. I got the job." She'd been interviewing for a position with an international humanitarian organization. This role would utilize her marketing skills to promote clean water initiatives in developing countries. It was precisely the kind of work that aligned with her values, the career she'd been pursuing before Michael convinced her that nonprofit work wasn't prestigious enough for his future wife. Sarah, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. There's one catch. The position is based in Costa Rica. I'd be gone for 2 years, maybe longer. I felt a pang of anticipated loneliness, but it was overwhelmed by excitement for her opportunity. That sounds like the adventure of a lifetime. You're not upset? I know we just got close again, and I'd be leaving. Sarah, honey, I crashed your wedding to save you from making a mistake that would have cost you your authentic life. I'm not about to discourage you from living that authentic life now that you've found it. I could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line. Dad, I love you. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I love you too, sweetheart, and I'll be here when you get back, proud as hell of everything you accomplished. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house, thinking about the strange turns life had taken. 6 months ago, I'd been excluded from my daughter's wedding, watching her transform into someone I didn't recognize. Tonight, I was her biggest supporter as she embarked on the kind of meaningful work that would define her character rather than her social status. Maria's photo smiled at me from the mantel, and I could almost hear her voice. You did well, Tommy. You brought our daughter home. Outside, Sacramento settled into evening quiet, and I returned to my papers, planning lessons for teenagers who were beginning to learn that the hardest choices in life were usually the most important ones. Sarah had learned that lesson spectacularly in front of 200 witnesses in a $5,000 dress she'd never wear again. And somehow, despite the unconventional circumstances, it had been the most beautiful wedding celebration I'd ever attended. Even if there hadn't been a wedding,